think I'm live, and now I think I'm unmuted. I have to check YouTube here and move it to my other screen. There we are. And are we? Hey, there we go. There we go. All right, well, thank you for bearing with me while we handle the technical issues. A lot going on. Um, I'm happy to be back. It's been a couple, 2 or 3 weeks since I've done a live podcast episode. The reason being life has gotten in the way. I have made every effort to kind of post some content and get some things out there. And I ran a live in-person face-to-face game 2 weeks ago, which I shared to the Patreon group. And then yesterday we ran a School of the Empire as well as a live Kriegsspiel 2022 game. So all of that has been a very good time. All of this in addition to the play-by-post stuff that I'm still involved in. Um, I was umpiring a big play-by-post, but decided, hey, I really want to play because I had a role in that game prior to becoming an umpire, and an opportunity came up to resume the role. So I turned in my umpire hat and went back to playing. So good times, and those of you who know me and who know about the IKS, you know that was really my motivation because I was always having to umpire. By creating a group and teaching other people how to run Kriegsspiels, I get to play, and it's been a good time. So let's talk about what we got going on here with the K22 system. Some exciting news. I think I've reached a decision what I'm going to do with this system. I've I have an offer to be a publisher of the system, well, actually from a publisher, to professionally produce and publish this game. However, my share of the proceeds from that would be quite slim, even though I think they seem to be what they call industry standard based on my research. I don't know. I don't know about handing somebody else a copy of something that I've worked on, and then they get the lion's share of the proceeds. Um, and I don't know. I also want to retain creative control over the system because I'll probably be making even more little tweaks and adjustments and so on. In any case, the plan that I've reached is I figured out that I can create an online course using online teaching software where I would teach and illustrate every little bit of the game, making little tiny videos and little write ups for it. And that way, a person can watch that and learn how to umpire using the K22 system. Players, of course, don't need to know the rules, just the umpires do, and then make the module available on Tabletop Simulator, or also um, teach people how they can go source their own maps and other materials so they can play face to face, which is really what I would like to see. I would like to see Kriegsspiel played face to face more often, and the K22 system is designed to do exactly that. It's designed to allow, let's say, a group of 2 or 3 people to get together on a Saturday for 4 or 5 or 6 hours and play a little Kriegsspiel scenario, which should be absolutely doable under the K22 system. You can also run larger games, but then the workload and the umpire need goes up. You need more umpires, and also um, what was I going to say? I'm going to try to develop solitaire scenarios for it, so that way you can play solitaire and kind of play against a little AI and see how you do. So there you have it. Oh, there's Zephyr, our new puppy, in the background. All right, Mama has to keep him quiet. Now let's talk about the latest on K22. So K22 is designed to play closer to original Kriegspiel. In the IKS, we've been playing a lot of core and division level games with 15-minute turn increments. And we had a system that we were using called the brigade system. I don't even know. I think I've removed all the dice and elements from that, or most of the elements from it. And the brigade system works really, really well. If you want to do these division size engagements, if you want to have corps versus corps or army versus army or just division versus division. It works really, really well. However, I had some issues with the way the combat was resolved because it felt like the units were too durable, too sticky. They would stay in combat for hours based on this system, which is absolutely non-realistic. Now, as a community, we've kind of tweaked those rules and we've addressed that concern. But I also wanted to produce a version of Kriegsspiel that isn't, it's not like we're going to refight the Battle of Gettysburg. It's like I want to fight a more typical skirmish. I want to fight these smaller level engagements that are mostly hypothetical, but that were common during the Napoleonic era, and put the player into a brigade commander position. Again, very much like original Kriegsspiel. Original Kriegsspiel puts you in command of a battalion or of a brigade, and you have to solve some kind of a problem. The original Kriegsspiel turns take place in 2-minute increments. We compromise and we play in 5-minute increments with the K22 system. The problem with the K22 system versus what we've been doing is it's not really suitable for it's not suitable for really large engagements because the turns are too short. It's also not suitable for meeting engagements. So if I have a unit here in the let's say in one corner of the map, because a very common way of playing the game is we'll set an objective like these hills here on this particular map, and we'll say red enters here and blue enters in the opposite corner. And right away, I think you can see the problem because blue coming in here and red coming in here. Well, if you're playing in 5-minute increments and each square represents about 5 minutes of marching on clear open terrain along a road, so this is 5 minutes of time, 5 minutes of march. You see that it's going to become a really long game just to maneuver to contact. So what we do is we fast forward and we get the units into contact, which is fine if you're playing with 2 players. But now what happens when you have 3 or 4 players? Behind this guy you have another one, and behind this guy you have another one, and you can't really see the arrows. But you've got multiple brigades converging on the same objective, or they're doing something. They're coming in from different directions. Well, you fast forward to contact. Now I've got 2 players who are skirmishing over this area here, but I've also got players who are back here and over here and so on, and they are not in the fight. And the turn cadence, it's going to take, maybe 10 minutes to kind of, here's your report to both players that are involved. Here's reports to all the other players. What are your orders? Get orders, process the orders. Realistically, it'll probably take more like 15. So if I have 15 minutes between moves, and I am playing a game that moves in 5-minute increments. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 hour of my Saturday, my game time, my very precious game time on Saturday. In 1 hour, I have moved from this position here to this position here. I am not involved in the battle, and it's consumed an hour of my Saturday. That doesn't work, folks. That doesn't work. And that's a pretty serious limitation of the K22 system. So the idea of the K22 system is it's not designed for these big, huge, epic, grand battles that some people want to play. If you want to do that, you're going to need to use a bigger system, again, like the brigade system. If you want to play a 1 versus 1, however, then in that case, yes, you would go ahead and play the K22 system. So again, K22 is designed for a small, intimate game between friends, face-to-face or on tabletop simulator are both fine. And it's designed to play in a short time, 2 to 4 hours. So again, it's designed for typical gamers on a typical Saturday or Sunday or an afternoon or evening to sit down and just run a Kriegsspiel for fun. Again, 3 people, it's perfect. But I also have a way to play it with 2 players, and I'm also going to write some single player scenarios so we can get some 1-player action as well. But that's the idea behind all of this here, okay? So as I'm going about that, that's one of the limitations. And one of the problems is in playtesting, I have played some bigger games and found right away, oops, that's kind of boring for that guy who's at the tail end of the column. Yesterday, we played a game, and it was two players versus three, and the third player who was on the blue side barely got into the action when the battle was essentially decided. However, his movements to contact were critical to deciding the engagement. But he never got to actually fight the enemy. But his maneuvering helped win the battle. But still, people want to roll dice. They want to play. They want to shoot at the enemy. So speaking of, let's talk about how that goes. In the K22 system, I originally called it the brittle system, and the reason I called it the brittle system originally was because I felt that units they were too durable. They stuck around in battle much longer than they historically would have. Again, you read the histories, the typical skirmish was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Now you're pushing it any longer than that. You know, in that time, you've gone through all of the ammunition in your cartridge box if you're firing like crazy. Even then, you probably don't because you're not firing like crazy. You're skirmishing, and one side or the other has fled the scene after 5, 10, 15 minutes or so. And that was very, very typical. So I didn't want battles that lasted for hours and hours unless the players kept reinforcements and rotated fresh units into the fight, which is historical. That's how it happens historically. That's how it happens in real life. You have a unit that cycles in to replace the unit whose ammunition is running low, and the fresh unit takes over. When you see situations like that at big battles like Waterloo, for example, you have, one company would replace the other company in the line, or however they did it. You could have a battle that would last for a very long, extended time. And if you have, again, um, what do you call it? Division versus division, or core versus core, it's okay then to see these longer fights between units. But in what we call the brigade system, you would have brigades who are hanging out and shooting at each other for hours. Didn't quite work. So I wanted the units to, I wanted to basically do this thing where instead of rolling a bucket of dice with one die for each piece that's on the board, I wanted to roll one die and have an immediate outcome. Doing that speeds up the combat resolution. It also speeds up the battle resolution because now I have a result. So I came up with these 8-sided dice. And let's see here. Real quick, I want to address a question, and I'll come right back to this concept here. But it's very important that I answer your guys' questions. So Otto asks, have you tried hosting a game using the K22 system's way of rolling combat, but having turns be 15 minutes and having players command formations similar to the size of other games? And the answer to that is no. But there is no reason why this system can't be adapted upwards to do that. Again, you have to adjust the time for it, but yes, you can absolutely do that. But for me, I wanted to focus on something with smaller commands that plays closer to original Kriegsspiel, where players are commanding battalions and brigades at most. But yes, it is possible to adapt the system upward. We might have to take a look at some of the results on the die because I've kind of adjusted them to reflect what's going on at that lower level. For example, here I have a counter battery die that you roll when we have batteries firing at each other. You probably wouldn't roll a counter battery die in those larger engagements, unless even if you have a grand battery. I don't know how you'd resolve that, but you'd figure out a way, but probably not like this. This is when you have one battery of guns shooting at another battery of guns. There's a miss, there's a hit, and so on, and there's another hit, and such. Wow, a lot of hits there. For not bad for a die where there's only 3 hits possible. On a 7 or lower, you have a miss. Because I don't want to encourage counter battery. I want the artillery supporting the infantry, which is its point. But yes, that's my thinking there. Barry says, good to see Kriegsspiel on YouTube. Thank you. And Barry, you're absolutely welcome. Yes, it belongs here. This is how we're going to kind of evangelize, if you will, get more people playing the game. And the more people who play it and umpire it, the more games I get to play, which at the end of the day is the goal for me. Coming back to the dice now, I told you I made all of these 8-sided dice. And in a number of play tests, one of the problems is I found that I would have too many outlier results. So a 1 or an 8 is really an outlier result. So here is an 8-sided die, and this is what I call the advantage die. I put the rules right on the dice because I can in Tabletop Simulator. That way it helps the umpire to know which die to pick up and roll. In this case, the superior unit has 2 points of combat value greater than the opponent. Now, I haven't talked to you about combat value, but basically that relates to how effective the unit should be in combat. A militia unit, for example, would have a combat value of just 4, while let's say a guard or elite unit would have a combat value of 6. And therefore, the elite unit is going to be superior and rolls this die where they have more advantages over the inferior unit. But what happens when you get these 1 results? Well, you're likely to get them because you're going to get 1 out of 8. You're going to get these. It's like a 12% chance of an outlier result. You notice on the result of a 1, and by the way, this die is itself reformed, but this is like a 2.0 version of this die. But superior just retreats in this case. Normally, on an even odd situation, the superior would be routed. Okay, but I came up with, they really shouldn't, guards wouldn't rout from militia, I don't think. They might retreat, they might fall back, but they're not necessarily going to rout. So I kind of changed the die up. But I still found that with the D8, it's still not quite, it didn't quite feel right. I still had too many outlier results where I had a unit that probably shouldn't be doing so well, doing kind of well because, well, I threw 8s a couple times in a row, or I threw 1s a couple times in a row. So to kind of dilute that, I went to D10s, and the D10s feel a lot better. They do seem to be working better. I'm pretty happy with them. And I am going to create more D10s. These here are the cavalry units, the cavalry dice. These 3 dice are next up to be changed. And I was working on the unopposed artillery, but I might not have to change this one. This one I can keep as a D8, or I'll probably, for consistency's sake, make it a D10. If we end up playing a physical copy of this game, if we produce a physical copy, I don't think people will be able to get all these beautiful dice. I'll see if I can have something produced along these lines, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be prohibitively expensive. So what'll probably happen is there's going to be a combat results chart, kind of similar to this one. This here's the cavalry matrix, the cavalry rules aid, but I'll be making a combat results table, and then all you need is the 1d10, and then you just have to check the correct column. It would be pretty, it would be cool to have the correct dice, just like in real Kriegsspiel. Remember, in original Kriegsspiel, technically I think it's the 1824 rules, they came up with custom dice, and the entire thing is you have to select the correct die to roll. And then knowing which die to roll is hard unless you know the rules. But here, again, I've put the rules right here on these dice. So if you are lucky enough to play with the Tabletop Simulator module, everything's right there for you. Anyway, the maps and such are on tabletop are also we overlay these 400 pace grids. If you don't have a map and you want to play, you're going to use one of these rulers, one of these player aids, or you can use the actual Kriegsspiel ruler, which if you have one of these maps, like these are the Bill Leeson maps. I know Too Fat Lardies sells printed or printable versions of these maps. But if you use this, you can use the ruler here, and it measures out 400 paces there. and that's about 5 minutes of movement. Some people are a little more generous and they'll give 500 paces of movement. I know in Free Kriegsspiel, General Verdi du Vanois would give 100 paces per minute. To me, I think that's a little too generous for my comfort. Maybe on open terrain or on a road in column, maybe. But I like to kind of do 400 paces. That's sort of just a little thing. It doesn't really make a big difference, and it doesn't really make a big difference even in the course of a day's battle. Um, but that's just kind of how we are. There's a little bit of variation in how we umpires run things. And you as an umpire will be able to vary things. You'll be able to change rules or tweak things or change die roll modifiers as you see fit. Because as I like to tell people, all of these rules are merely guidelines. The entire thing is to create a scenario that is realistic, that gives the players problems to solve. There's a baked in problem that each player has to solve. They will then create problems for each other. I call those organic problems. Problems that arise from the fog of war and from the opponent doing what the opponent does. I call those organic problems. So as a player, you're going to have the big problem given to you by the umpire. You're going to have the organic problems that are created by fog of war and your opponent. And the entire idea is to try to solve those. And the umpire just kind of oversees and makes sure that there are no really crazy results, like a militia unit suddenly routs a whole battalion of, elite guard or whatever. You don't want weird things like that, or you don't want this, a tiny unit that charges uphill and routs an entrenched division or something silly because the die came up a 6 or an 8 when that just wouldn't happen. And again, the umpire would intervene in that case. And generally speaking, according to the rules, it's not really possible anyway because it's not possible in real life. But sometimes you get these odd results where the die just hits and the die hits 2 or 3 times in a row. And if you're in Las Vegas, that's great, but in Kriegsspiel, it's not so great for you. And so the umpire has the discretion to tweak these things to make sure that the results are believable and realistic. And that's part of what we train our umpires to do when we run School of the Umpire. We tell them, hey, there are times when you have to bend the rules a little bit. And the only real rule is that the explanation you give to the players should be reasonable or rational. Like you should be able to justify why a combat or an exchange of fire, whatever it may be, happened the way it happened. In other words, you should be able to weave it believably into the story. And at what point you can do that, the actual rule that you use to resolve the situation is kind of irrelevant. You can roll one of these cool dice. You could also flip a coin. You could also do what Verdi von Wahl did and just say, you know what, I think this is a win for this side, and that's it. And this side I'm going to impute so many casualties, and I didn't flip a coin or roll a die or nothing. I just said, in my infinite wisdom, here's the result or the outcome of the battle. That's the end of it. You're the umpire. That's how you do things. And again, as long as it's rational and explicable and the players understand it and the lesson is taught, that's mission accomplished. Again, Kriegsspiel isn't really designed to be played so much as a game. It's really designed, or developed, I should say, into a military training exercise. And we in the IKS have decided, you know what, we want to play it as a game. There's a lot of gamers out there who really like the Fog of War experience. Let's turn it into a game. And that's what we've done. We've turned it into a game while retaining all the classic and essential elements that make it a Kriegsspiel. And I'll have you know when I've compared notes with people who do play Kriegsspiel professionally without naming any names or anything, but they've told me we do things pretty much the same way you do. So we are running actual Kriegsspiel, even if our rules vary in some details. At the end of the day, the experience that we create for the players is the same experience that's being created for people who are playing this game professionally and who are learning from it as cadets in actual militaries. And it's a heck of a fun experience. But anyway, K22 system designed to be played in maybe 2, 4, 6 hours. Yesterday's game, for example, had 5 players. We got it out in 2 hours time of play, about a 30-minute setup period, and you can absolutely do it. So there we have it. I'm going to carry on development, and I'm going to begin work of posting this to an educational software application or package or whatever. I'm going to package everything up. I'm going to teach everyone the rules with little videos, and you'll be able to go through that and set up your own games and play with your friends to your heart's content. Here is Achilles. I want to say hi to Achilles. You've missed uh, you've missed the Sunday morning shows as our celebrity host now back from his hiatus. I don't know about celebrity, although I was in Hollywood last Sunday, which is why I was not able to do a show then. But yes, I am back from hiatus. I'll be here. I will probably miss 2 Sundays in April, though. I'm taking a trip to Arizona. But after that, it's Kriegsspiel all the way on. So uh, there we are. I'm happy to be back, though. I've missed doing these shows, and I am committed to doing one every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time. I like to talk about whatever's going on in the world of Kriegsspiel, and I also like to have guests. So if at any time you want to appear on the show and share your thoughts or opinions or talk about Kriegsspiel, hop on the channel or let me know, and we can sit here with our coffee and we can go around and talk Kriegspiel, because that's the idea. It's all about having fun. So I want to thank you all for being here, and that's it. I will see you all on the next adventure.